for those of you who may not get a lot of exposure to cryptocurrency, we're going to talk a little bit today about Web3 and the available funding that's actually available through the crypto ecosystem. For those of you who are not familiar with VitaDAO, VitaDAO it's the longest standing BioDAO. It's basically 3 years old. And basically what VitaDAO does is it collects funds from the crypto industry or the crypto ecosystem. And in case you're kind of curious about this, there's about $4 trillion locked up in crypto. It's not a small sum of money. And there's an interesting connection between the longevity community and crypto. Both are kind of on the bleeding edge. Both want to try new things. So there's a natural connection between those two communities. And so what VitaDAO does is it allows you to bring together funds. People buy Vita tokens, which are crypto assets. That money goes into a treasury, and that same community then decides how to deploy that capital. And so within our ecosystem, the first Genesis auction, which was 3 years ago, we raised $5.1 million, relatively small sum, but still not bad. And basically, the community then turns around and votes on projects to fund. So a principal investigator or a small company could come up and say, look, we have a project, we'd like to get some funding, and we have a longevity deal flow working group within the DAO that does the scientific due diligence. And I would not be surprised that there's a number of you here that might actually have Vita tokens, and you're able to vote on what projects get funded. That funding then gets turned into IP or research in general. And then what we try to do is we try to commercialize it. And there's a number of obvious ways to do that. You can do IP sublicensing, NewCo spinouts. But the thing I want to talk more about today is IP-NFTs and IPTs, which I'll explain. So just to give you a sense of how big is the community, currently we have 4,100 token holders who can vote on what funding is deployed in what area. So it's not a huge community, but not bad. And one of the things that we also try to do, because again, it's community driven, it's all kind of like crowdsourcing, we do have something called VitaDAO.global, which is where we are now starting to provide products, services, things that are interesting to the longevity community. And a lot of this is just to get people more interested in the field and to recognize it. VitaDAO tends to work just to kind of let you see where we fit in the ecosystem. We tend to be the very first checks in. So it's really very much, in a lot of cases, we have principal investigators that have an idea and they just want to try it. They're coming out of a university, they're coming out of a lab. We'll probably be the first person to cut a check. And then our job is to move it so that the traditional investment ecosystem can pick it up. So over the past 3 years, we have approximately 22 projects that we funded. And when we first started, a lot of people tend to think of us as a traditional funding model. They'll say, oh, you're like a crowdsourced VC. And I can understand why that might be the case, but that has never been the intention. In our first year, we've funded some existing startups, many of which you've already seen. And those were traditional equity type deals. Then what we've done is we started to look inside our community and to start doing spinouts based on that. And then the final thing, which I'm going to talk more about, are IP-NFTs and IPTs, which are projects that are funded. And then what we do is we package up that intellectual property. So if you were to think of transferring an asset to Pfizer or Novartis or something like that, all the legal documents, all the data, all the patents, all of that can be packaged up and encrypted and put on the blockchain to allow it to be now commercialized through the crypto ecosystem. And the crypto ecosystem allows you to tokenize that asset. So people can now buy tokens or partial governance and ownership in those assets using the blockchain. So I mentioned startups. So we actually have done 2 startups recently, one of which is with Vera Gorbanova. A number of you probably know her work out of University of Rochester. And we have another startup, which is called Artan Bio. And that was based on Michael Torres and Anthony Schwartz, both who were just members of the community that had a good idea and wanted to produce something. So that's another company. I want you to notice the 91,300 on Artan. Just keep that number. That is a very small check, but I'll explain why that's important. So IP-NFTs and IPTs, as I mentioned, you package up intellectual property. It's an asset. And then you can turn around and tokenize that and offer those tokens to the crypto community. And again, there's a lot of interest in people being able to crowdsource or be involved with these projects. And so to give you one example, Victor Kralchuk, University of Newcastle, he came to us with a project. We put in an initial funding of about $235,000. Not a lot of money, but he was able to go forward and produce a large amount of, do the research, and there were some targets and things that have come out of that. So then what we did is we said, okay, we'll package this in an IP NFT, and then we'll offer it to the community. And we offered them at 30 cents a token, and today they're averaging $3.71. And what has happened is it's gone from a $285,000 project to a multi-million-dollar valuation. And the trading of those tokens actually generates ongoing funding for his lab. So every transaction, about 1% of the transaction fees on the cryptocurrency blockchain gets put back into the lab as a funding mechanism. So this is an interesting platform. By the way, that was 1 year ago, so it's gone from 30 cents to $3.71. Vita RNA, so I mentioned Artan Bio, 91,300. We just launched this about 2 weeks ago, and now it has a market valuation of about $4 million. And again, the trading of the tokens is now generating ongoing funding to fund this project. So it's kind of an interesting model. People always ask, cryptocurrency, kind of on the fringe. Is this stuff even legal, right? And one of the things I wanted to sort of distinguish here is that here in Europe, more so than in the United States, the SEC is still sort of sorting its way through a lot of cryptocurrency. But here in Europe, there is something called MiCA, which is Markets and Crypto Assets Regulation. And there is now a proper, completely legal, perfect way to issue cryptocurrency tokens, raise funding, and deploy that funding. And so VitaDAO actually has issued with Artan Bio the first MiCA-compliant biotoken, which is the Vita RNA token. So it is completely legal. You can, as a matter of fact, we work here out of Ireland, and so you can buy the tokens here and go with that. What's interesting about it is the ROI for people that want to invest in crypto is really quite good. And so for people like the Victor Kralchuks and the Michael Torreses who want to move their projects forward, you have the ability to raise probably a couple of $1 million early on in the project. And then we have a mechanism that allows you to work alongside traditional biotech investors. And I was asked to do this quickly, so I did it as best I could, Phil, so to get us back on track.
Thank you.